My name is Tiffany Q, and welcome to my ABRSM Grade 5 Theory Lessons series, where I record snippets of my live lessons with my students. Please note that this is not a substitute for a textbook. If you're preparing for the theory exam, I would still recommend having a teacher to guide you through both the coursework and exam paper preparation.
In question 6 of the ABRSM Grade 5 theory paper, we have terms, signs, and instruments. It also includes the section on ornaments, which we'll look at in a second. First up, terms and signs. As you can see on this page, I have included the translations and the terms from grades 1 all the way to grade 5. With each progressive grade in ABRSM, they expect you to know all the previous grades as well. I know it might look quite overwhelming, but I do have some tips on how to learn this off. But first of all, I'm going to go straight into the grade 5 terms and signs, and I'm going to explain all their meanings. For grade 5, they've added on more Italian terms and some German terms. So let's take a look at the Italian terms. And niente means to nothing. So this is usually found perhaps at the very end of a piece, when they want you to fade out until there is silence. Ad libitum, or ad lib, commonly abbreviated like this, means at choice. It gives the performer lots of flexibility on what to do. For example, if it says retardando ad lib, it means slow down at choice, so you can choose as much as you want to either slow down or potentially not even to slow down at all. Attacca means straight on. This is quite common between movements of pieces, or if you've got a few pieces that are associated with each other, for example, a prelude and fugue, there may be the term attacca at the very end of the prelude to say, don't wait, go straight to the next piece. Cantando is very similar to a previous term that you might be familiar with, cantabile, which also means in the singing style. So that hopefully should be easy to associate and to learn. Con dolore means with sorrow. Con spirito, with spirit, so those two are not too bad. Doloroso, sorrowful, and you can see the resemblance between doloroso and dolore. Sometimes these are translated as with grief as well. Largamente means broadly, so this could be the speed, stretching at the speed. Morendo and perdendosi both mean dying away, so fading away into nothing. Quasi, as if, so this is generally placed with other words in the context of a musical piece. Rinforzando, or F, or FZ, or rinf, means reinforcing. So it's generally used in a section that's quite exciting, and they want some extra accents or extra power. Smorzando, or smorz, means dying away. So you'll notice that there are a lot of terms for dying away. Sonoro means sonorous, so a really generous, loud, echoey sound. Sottovoce, under the voice. And the way I like to describe this is, imagine you're an actor on stage, but you're whispering. So you still need people to be able to hear what you're saying, but it is a different tone, a very hushed tone, so under the voice, almost like you're whispering in music. Some German terms: langsam, which means slow, lebhaft, lively, mäßig, which is moderately, ruhig, tranquil or peaceful, schnell is fast, and traurig is sad. So these terms are quite straightforward with their English translations, but they are tricky to learn, especially if you're not used to German terms and you're more used to the Italian or even French from grade 4. Now, how on earth are we going to memorize all of this? One method that has worked really well for my students from my own experience is by choosing 3 different colors and color coding the words according to these 3 colors, so you know exactly what to study the most and to prioritize. So let's say that we've got this color here, and I'm just going to choose these 3 because I have them, And whatever ones that you have as well, you choose. It really depends on what you have available. If you don't have highlighters, a pen, colored pencil, any of those will do. So when you have these colors, choose for yourself, decide which color is going to represent what. So one is going to represent something that's difficult. You've never seen it before. It looks really hard to memorize. The middle one is going to be something you've never really seen before, but you actually think that you will be able to learn that, okay? And the yellow is for everything that you know already, which you'll probably be surprised. You actually probably will know a lot of these, especially from grades 1, 2, and even 3. Or the last color will also represent things that you can guess. Now, this will be completely different for everyone. So don't highlight just because I've highlighted it. Look at it yourself and go through it according to whatever your experience was. So for yellow, let's say that's the easy one. So I might go to grade 1 and go, I know that one already. I know this one. I know this one. That one. I've seen it before, but I don't quite know it. So that one might get an orange. Okay, and then for continue and until every single word has a color. So if you go to grade 3, you might go, I've never seen the word energico before, but that's pretty clear to learn. That means energetic, and it looks like the English. So that for me is really easy. And this one as well. Where is it? Grade 4. If I say, misterioso, that's of course mysterious. I could have guessed that. So then you also highlight in yellow. And then you might think, grade 5, this one, I don't know, langsam. That one, I had no clue what that was. I've never studied German, and that looks hard. I might want to spend more time on that. So that's the idea. And then at the very end, when you have the 3 colors, what you're going to do is you're going to spend most of your study time just on the blue and ignore the other 2. Then another day, you're going to go and look at the orange. So that's medium. And then for the yellow, you barely need to spend any time because you already know those words, or you can guess them very accurately. So maybe just 1 minute every now and then, or just, once or twice before your actual exam, that will do. So this ensures that you're not wasting your time revising the ones you do know over and over again, and you're really just focusing on the ones that you don't know. There is also a second page of this PDF with other signs that are from grades 1 and 2. So be very familiar with all these because you never know if they might come up, either in this section, but to be honest, more so in question 7, music in context, where sometimes they ask you for what these markings mean, or some of the expressions as well. The next section is ornaments. Ornaments are extra notes that decorate a melody and make it more interesting in music. In the exam, you will be expected to recognize the symbol or the sign for the ornaments, which you can see on the left, but also be able to identify which ornaments they are if they are written out. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the ornaments as if they were written out instead of having the symbol to represent what they are. Realistically, usually we don't actually have a trill that's written out with all these semiquavers. We just use a sign or the symbol. But for this theory exam, you will have to know what they are. You'll have to be able to recognize it, almost play it in your head, and then deduce from the patterns and the number of notes which ornament it is. So the first one here is a trill. It sounds like this. A trill symbol has the letters TR with a little squiggle, or sometimes just TR without the squiggle. And it means you play the note itself and the note right above it, and you keep alternating those as fast as you can for the duration of the note. So because this is a minim, I have it written out like this. 2 crotchets. That's 1 crotchet and that's another crotchet. In the exam, usually we see 8 notes like this, alternating. Sometimes with very fancy trills, they might want to start on the top note instead. So this is quite common in some Baroque music, just to make it sound a bit more fancy. So instead of starting on the C, sometimes people start on the D. I'm going to talk about the turn now, and then I'm going to go back to the trill for a quick second. So the next one is a turn, and we often call this an upper turn. So if you see that in exam, it's the same thing as a regular turn. So don't be put off by that. It looks a bit like a sideways and flipped over letter S. And it can be placed either on top of the note, or as you see here, after the note. And there's a slight difference between the two, which you will need to know. So this one is when the turn is placed after the note. So what this means is you first play the note itself, so in this case the C, then you play the note above it, back to the C, down below, and then back to the C. It sounds very complicated, but it's sort of like this almost circular motion. So you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 notes in total because this turn is written after the note. If the turn was written just above it, then what you do is instead of playing the C, you go straight to the note above it first. And then you go back to the C, or whatever note it is, then down below, and then back. So in this instance, you'd only have 4 notes. And I think that's a really important thing to memorize as well when you're learning your ornaments. How many notes are actually in the written out version? And when I talk about notes, I mean pitches. Because another thing that I would recommend students not to do is to look at the rhythms either here or in your book or whatever notes that you're using. Don't memorize the rhythms too accurately, because the written out, as I said, they're not usually found in music, because they're written out. They're just there to serve a purpose of teaching you what the ornament is like. And when they hide one of these in a piece of music, just for you to, again, be able to identify, they will probably adjust the rhythms ever so slightly to fit within whatever time signature they have. So some of these might not always be exactly like a triplet or exactly 2 demi-semiquavers with a semiquaver attached to another quaver tied. Okay, so do take a look at the patterns most of all, and then the number of notes in it. Back to the trill. Another way of doing a fancy trill is having 2 alternating notes and then having a little upper turn at the very end. So here, if it goes C, D, C, D, C, D, C, D, it might go C, D, C, B, C. So you'll see this sort of like dip at the end, which makes that trill sound even more fancy. It's still called a trill, but if you see that, don't get confused between that and an upper turn. So the difference is, for trills, generally speaking for the exam, I notice that they either give you an 8-note trill or a 9-note trill if they have that little fancy dip at the end. And then for the turns, it's always either 4 notes or 5 notes. Moving on now to the upper mordent. So the symbol looks like a little squiggle. And what that means is you play the note above it, and you play the note down below it really quickly. It sounds like this. Similarly, a lower mordent, the sign looks pretty much identical, but it has a little line, a little slash right through the middle. That means you play the note below it, and then back to the note really fast. It sounds like this. The next one is the axiakichora, or commonly known as the grace note. A good way to remember this is the fact that the word grace has a letter C in it, and you've got 4 C's in axiakichora. What that looks like is a tiny note, miniature note, with a line going through it. That's really important. And it just means play it really, really fast, like a crush note. So you'll see here, they represented it by a very fast note, a demi-semiquaver, and then all these other like longer notes tied together to just show the difference between the demi-semiquaver and then this longer note. The appoggiatura looks similar in the sense that you've got a small miniature note and it's joined to the main note. What this means is we generally cut whatever the main note is by half, and we do a step down or step up. So in this case, it's a D to a C, or maybe if that note were lower, it might be a B to a C. Appoggiaturas are the slowest ornament, and they either go up or go down. Now you're probably wondering, why on earth didn't they just write 2 crotchets? Is it really necessary to make it so complicated? Well, a bit of history about the appoggiatura, very, very common in the classical period. But the appoggiatura is not so much sort of a melodic ornamentation. To be honest, it's more of a harmonic ornamentation. Now what that means is, imagine you've got a chord here. So let's pretend we've got this chord. So for anyone who is very shrewd, you might notice that this here is the chord of C major. So if I have that D does not belong to the chord of C major. Listen. So what they do is they will show you very visually that that D is not actually part of the harmony, but it's sort of a little clash or some dissonance to make that harmony more interesting. And that's why they would write it like this rather than any other way, rather than something like this. Because if they wrote it like this, harmonically speaking, it might be a bit confusing to tell what the purpose of that is. I'm getting a little bit too geeky here, but that's why positores exist. The final section of question 6 is instruments of the orchestra and voice types. For this, you'll be given 5 true or false questions about instruments, and I'm going to go through all 4 families and exactly what you need to know for each one. I also have a summary of everything you need to know in a table that I've done out, so please feel free to download that as well in the description box below. Aside from question 6, they generally tend to ask you a question about the range of the instruments in question 7, so it's really important to be able to tell how high or low an instrument can play and what their main clef is. But I'm going to start now with the strings family. So the strings family has the violin, viola, cello, double bass, and harp. The violin, you need to know that it is the highest instrument of the string family, and it can be played arco, which means with a bow, which is with this stick attached to the horsehair. As you can tell, I'm not a violinist, which is why I'm not describing this very well. But pizzicato is when you pluck the strings with your finger, and consordino is when you attach a mute to the instrument to give it a bit of a subdued sound due to the reduction of vibration. So I believe that is a mute here that you can see, this black rubber device, and you place that on the bridge and it just stops the strings from vibrating too much, so it creates that sort of more hushed sottovoce sound. So these terms, arco, pizzicato, and consordino, sometimes this is abbreviated to consord with a dot after it. These are really important. And the other thing you need to know about the violin is that it uses the treble clef. The lowest note is G. You don't need to know that actually if you're not a violinist, but you do need to know that it uses the treble clef because of its general range. And then the viola is the second highest instrument of the string family. Similarly, it can be played arco, pizzicato, consordino, and it uses the alto clef and treble clef, but for the purpose of the exam, you only need to focus on the very first clef I put here, because that's the main clef, and that's as far as they want you to go, really. The cello is the second lowest instrument of the string family. It can be played arco, pizzicato, consordino. You can see a bit of repetition here. And the main clef is the bass clef, and then they use other clefs when the music gets higher. The double bass is the lowest instrument of the string family. It can be played arco, pizzicato, consordino, and the clef uses is mostly bass clef, occasionally treble if it goes really, really high. Now, one really important thing you need to know is that it is a transposing instrument, and what this means is that the music that is written does not reflect how it sounds. So in this case, everything that's written for the double bass, they will make it sound automatically an octave lower. Not because they're intentionally doing it, but just because of how their instrument is designed. And finally, the harp. Harp strings are always plucked with the fingers, and then pedals or levers are used to change the pitch of the strings. So you'll see here with this smaller harp that we have these levers that you can adjust to tune the strings differently. However, this is very good for sort of folk music, traditional music, because they're very tonal. So they're either like in a major key or in a minor key, and you don't have to do very much change. But if you've got a classical piece that has many accidentals, it's better probably to use the concert harp here. And you can see it has actually 7 pedals altogether, one for each pitch, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And each of these pedals can change the pitches of all the strings of whatever note name it is simultaneously, which is really good. Harpists play music from 2 staves, treble and bass, just like piano music. Woodwind family, we've got the piccolo, flute, oboe, cor anglais, clarinet, and bassoon. If you're not a woodwind student, generally this is what people find most difficult to learn. But a few pointers. All of these woodwind instruments that I've bracketed, they all use a treble clef, with the exception of course the bassoon, which has the word bass in it. So that's one good way of memorizing that. Piccolo and flute are relatives of each other, so if you are a flute player, a professional flute player, you're generally also taught how to play the piccolo. So you're rarely just a piccolo player by itself. Same with oboe and cor anglais. So if you're an oboist and you're going the professional route, generally you will also pick up the cor anglais, which is a very similar version. And then another thing that is important to learn with these is if it's a double reed or a single reed, which I'll try my best to explain in a second. So starting with the highest, piccolo is the highest and the smallest. It's a relative of the flute, as I mentioned earlier. So flute players will generally learn the piccolo. The clef is treble clef, and it's a transposing instrument. The piccolo will always sound 1 octave higher than whatever music is written out for them. You don't need to know the transposition, you just need to know that the fact that it is a transposing instrument. Flute is the second highest instrument of the woodwind family and uses the treble clef. Nice and easy there. Oboe is a double reed instrument. So what is a double reed? If you look closely, you'll see this device here. And that skinny mouthpiece is called a double reed. And some instruments have this. A fun fact is that oboists spend, if they don't buy their reeds already pre-made, they spend a lot of time making their own. I once heard that oboists, I'm not sure if this is true, spend half their time making reeds. So if they have 4 hours to practice, they might spend 2 of those hours making reeds. But if you're an oboist, let me know what your experience is. Clef is treble clef, and other than that, that's all you need to know about the oboe. Cor anglais is a relative of the oboe. It uses treble clef, and it is a transposing instrument. Again, you do not need to know how much it transposes by, you just need to know that it is one. Clarinet is a single reed instrument, meaning that you only have one piece of wood and you slide that into the mouthpiece. You can't see it here because it's turned on its side, but that's what single reed means essentially. It uses a treble clef and it is transposing. Bassoon is a double reed instrument, you can see because of this skinny mouthpiece here, and the clef that it uses is the bass clef. Next family is the brass family. So in order of high to low, we've got the trumpet, horn, trombone, and tuba. For this, I actually like to split them into 2 because the higher 2, the trumpet and the horn, they both use the treble clef and they're both transposing instruments. Trombone and tuba, they both use the bass clef and they're both non-transposing. So I like learning them in that way. For the trumpet, it is the highest brass instrument. It uses the treble clef. Now, all brass instruments can be muted, and for this, you stick a sort of cone-like device into the bell of the instrument, and it completely changes the sound. Now, as far as I know, trumpets and all the other brass instruments have very interesting mutes. There's lots to explore there, but again, it's to sort of dampen the sound and change the quality. It is also a transposing instrument, like I mentioned earlier. French horn uses the treble clef. Second highest brass instrument, can be muted, it is transposing. Trombone can be muted, third highest brass instrument, and uses the bass clef. Tuba is the Tuba is the lowest sounding brass instrument, can be muted, and uses the bass clef. Next family is the percussion. And for this, all you need to know is whether the instrument is a pitched instrument or a non-pitched or unpitched instrument. Other terms for this are definite pitch, and this means that the instrument can play a pitch that we can write down on a stave. We can identify the name of that. An indefinite pitch, think of it as creating sort of a sound effect rather than being able to play a melody. So I like to show my students these pictures because I feel that sometimes when you see the instrument, you can actually guess if it's pitched or unpitched. So timpani, this is interestingly the only drum that is pitched. It's very, very low, and that's why you have to have several different drums in a concert because each one has a different pitch. There's just not enough time to tune them to the pitch that you want when you're playing them so fast successively. So each of these drums have a different pitch. The tubular bells is also pitched. You can see the different sort of tubings here. Xylophone is pitched. It's made out of wood. Marimba is also pitched. It's like the big sister of the xylophone. The glockenspiel is really small. It's pitched as well, made out of metal. It has a very sort of bright sound. And vibraphone is also pitched. This is often used in like meditation music, and it comes with a pedal, which really adds to this. What's it called? It also has a pedal, which adds to that sort of very calming, sustained atmosphere. The celesta is pitched as well. It's like a very tinkly music box sound, commonly known because of the Hedwig's theme from Harry Potter, or the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy from The Nutcracker by Tchaikovsky. Side drum is unpitched. Bass drum unpitched, so all these instruments just create a sound effect. Cymbals unpitched. Tambourine unpitched. Castanets unpitched. Tam-tam unpitched. Triangle unpitched. And that's that. And then the final section is voice types. There are 6 main voice types. Many more exist, but you just need to know these 6, and you need to know the order from high to low. So for women, let's start there. Soprano is the highest female voice. Then for the medium voice, it's called mezzo-soprano. Then we have alto for the low voice. And then for the men, the highest male voice is the tenor, which is, by the way, still lower than the alto. So tenor is the high voice, baritone is the medium voice, and bass is the low voice. We're going to take a look at an exam paper question now, but generally the way this is tested is they might say something like, true or false, an alto is higher than a mezzo-soprano. And then, of course, there you would give the answer false, because a mezzo-soprano is higher than an alto. This here is a sample exam paper question from the 2023 practice paper D. And I'm just going to go through this and show you how they test this in exam. So 6.1, they'll always start with 3 of these terms. In other grades, they sometimes test signs as well, but generally I only see the terms being tested for grade 5. So it's multiple choice. Ruhig, of course, means peaceful or tranquil. Smorzando is dying away, so you can take that one. And amabile, this is very interesting because that is not in the grade 5. That's from a previous grade. So that there is pleasant. I believe it's from grade 4, but you can check that out. 6.2 is the ornaments. So it says tick one box to name each of the 2 written out ornaments which are marked with brackets. So we see here. So what do we notice? We see 2 notes. They're really, really fast. So the first note is really fast and it goes on to the second note. So that there is a grace note or an axiakachora. So we can take that one. And this one here, this one is very confusing, but it looks like they've really only bracketed these 3 notes. So if we look at the rhythm in more detail, the first 2 notes are really fast. In fact, yes, that one is a demi-semiquaver and this one's also demi-semiquaver. This one is a semiquaver. So it's really, really fast here. So that looks like it is an upper mordant. Now you might think, well, if it's E, F, E, D, could that be a turn? But no, because if it was a turn, a lot of these rhythms would probably be a little bit more consistent. You wouldn't have a really, really fast sort of first two notes and then slower. And then 6.3, true or false for each of these 5 statements. Senza, sword, means to play without a mute. So just earlier we were looking at the term consordino, which is with the mute. And the word senza is from, I believe, grade 3 or one of those earlier grade terms, and that means without. So it's about putting 2 and 2 together there, without a mute. Always practice exam papers before you do your actual exam. It's just so useful for seeing exactly how they test you on some of these questions. The cor anglais uses a double reed, that's true. A viola can be played arco, that is true. The side drum produces notes of definite pitch, that's false, because side drums can only play dynamics or a sort of a sound effect rather than actual melody. The trombone is the highest sounding woodwind instrument. This is a really funny question because, first of all, it's not even a wood instrument, and it's not the highest in the family that it's from, which is the brass instrument. So that's a really interesting way and a really good example of how they like to test you on some of these questions. So that's question 6 in a nutshell. Practice loads. It's one of those sections where you do have to spend a lot of time memorizing things, unfortunately. So memorizing things in the way I said before, and do take a look at the notes down in the description box below. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments.